Amen. Thank you so much, Claire.
Well, hi everyone. Let me add my welcome to Colleen's. I'm Janet B. I've recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia. Really happy to be here to continue our journey through the big book, and tonight continuing our journey through We Agnostics, my favorite chapter in the book. So I will do a super brief summary of the beginning of the chapter, what we talked about next week. But as Colleen mentioned, our recordings are available on Podbean and YouTube. If you go on YouTube, just search for Recovery Jam. So the chapter We Agnostics, they talked about and they said, we want to make sure you learn something of alcoholism, of compulsive eating. And what they wanted us to learn is what was really smashed home in the first two chapters. Bottom of page 43, they're summing it up once more. And I'm going to change this all to food terms. The compulsive eater at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first compulsive bite. Except in a few rare cases, neither she nor any other human being can provide such a defense. Her defense must come from a higher power. So they're telling us we have no effective mental defense. We can't remember strongly enough the severity of our last binge. We can't remember that we really do care when we tell ourselves, I don't care, that we're going to wake up and feel awful the next day. We have no mental defense, neither us nor any other human being. So, not a group, not any other person can provide a defense. This defense must come from a higher power. So, then we turn the page and it's called We Agnostics. It's like, okay, it's like they're saying, okay, y'all, you're telling us we need to believe in God, but what if I don't? What if I'm an agnostic? Or what if you're like me? I was a practical agnostic. I always believed in God, but I treated him like a genie. He was there to like stay in his bottle until I had my three wishes, and then he needed to come out and grant my wishes and then just leave me alone. Um, and so they say to one who feels they're an atheist or an agnostic, this might be hard to feel you need to believe in God. But they don't say, well, if you can't believe in God, then just believe in a doorknob or make the group your higher power. Because that would be like someone going to the doctor and with a diagnosis of pneumonia, and the doctor saying the the treatment is penicillin. You need to swallow these pills. And the person saying, you know what, doctor, I don't like pills. And the doctor's like, okay, then just go take a vitamin C capsule instead. No, a doctor would never water down the treatment. So they're saying we don't water down the treatment, but we can ease people into it. And they say, okay, what's our problem? Lack of power. That was our problem. So we had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously, where are we to find this power? And then the mission statement of this book, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. So again, we talked last week, if this power is going to solve my problem, this power must be smart, must be strong, must be able to think, and must care about me, because this power could know how to solve my problem and just leave me alone. But this program promises us that when we draw near to God, he draws near to us and he gives us the power we need. So we went on in there and we ended on the top of page 51. So if you have your book, you can open on the top of 51. And we left off where it says, many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. And they say, well, that's a good argument for, yeah, we need faith, that knowing that God exists and not just like out there on a cloud somewhere, but exists and is involved in my life. That's what all the founders of AA had in common. And that's what all the people who work these steps today have in common. Like, yeah, God exists and he's like active and doing stuff in my life. And then further down on page 51, they talk about things that block us. It says men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. So I need to ask myself, Do I have superstition, traditions, like things I was brought up with that I'm only believing simply because I was brought up with these things? Or fixed ideas, like I won't change my mind no matter what? And they say, yeah, be careful. Remember, the people who lived in Columbus's time thought that a round earth was preposterous. And they said, okay, we need to ask ourselves, are some of us as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? And they say, there were American newspapers that were afraid to print that the Wright brothers had actually flown an airplane. They said, hadn't the best minds proved that that could never happen? And I always think that of airplanes, and I think it's really cool because if you think about it, like there's a law, I'm trying to think what I could live, a pen, the law of gravity, right? If I drop my pen, I know it's going to fall. That's just like the simple law of gravity. If, someone jumps out a, a high window, they're going to fall and be roadkill. How come birds don't fall out of the sky? How come airplanes don't fall out of the sky? And there's a law of aerodynamics that transcends the law of gravity. I'm not a physics person, I never took physics, but it's something like speed plus this times that. And suddenly the law of aerodynamics trumps the law of gravity. It's really cool when you think about it, right? If you go fast enough and whatever else goes in the equation, I should learn this if I'm going to talk about it. Aerodynamics trumps the law of gravity. And what they're telling us is, yeah, there's the world of, let me take what I want for myself. That's the only way I'm going to get it, the way of the world. And then there's the law of the spirit where we live above that, where we just say, I'm going to try to do God's will as best I can, even if I don't really understand God. I'm just going to think, if there was a God, what would he want from me? He would want me to be loving. He would want me to be honest. He would want me to sacrifice some things I want in order to help other people, because that's how my soul grows. And if I live that way, he's just going to take care of everything. My food problem, right? That's why we all came here. Like, we didn't care about becoming nicer people. We just wanted to stop binging or purging or whatever we were doing. God takes care of that. He takes care of our health problems. He takes care of our relationship with our kid problems. It's like we're not living in the world of gravity anymore. We're living in the world of spiritual aerodynamics. That's what this tells us. And they're saying, don't be like the people who said man could never fly. Like, our souls can fly. So page 52, they say, okay, usually in this people are liberal in their thinking, but they say, so let's apply that in spiritual terms. Page 52, we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. And then there's a list of things that describe an unmanageable life. We can be abstinent, but still have an unmanageable life. So these are things we should ask ourselves. Are we having trouble with personal relationships? Can we control our emotions? Are we feeling useless, full of fear, unhappy? It says we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of flight? It's like, who cares if someone could create an
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
theory? Not for you, Siri. So they talked about, back then people couldn't believe in an airplane flying. And aren't we sometimes as unbiased in the thinking about spiritual flight? And they say we shouldn't be. Isn't a basic solution of these bedevilments, unable to get along with people, things like that, more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. And I love that word bedevilments. It means to be controlled as if by devils. And I heard a speaker and he said, the steps cut the puppet strings. So often we say, I can't control my emotional nature, this because the other person is pushing my buttons. Well, if that's the case, it's my job to cut off the buttons because my buttons, my triggers are made up of my character defects. This week I have a 24-year-old daughter, and usually we get along really well, but she's going through some incredibly hard stuff right now. And we were talking, and she just hung up on me. I didn't do anything wrong. She just you know, you're biased. I'm going to call dad, slam. And okay, great. She called my husband. He gives great advice. Happy about that. But I was angry at her for that. And I sat there to do a 10 step because always if I'm angry, it's my fault. And I look back, I did not do one single thing to provoke it. And I'm like, but I'm angry. So I have a part. Really couldn't see it. Talked to my friend Melissa, and she said, I think when it comes to your daughter, you have to develop a thicker skin. So I thought about it and I thought, okay, thin-skinned isn't a character defect. So what's the character defect going on here? Like if I'm thin-skinned, what's going on? And I said, it's two things, hypersensitive and idolatry, right? Caring too much what another person thinks about me and being hypersensitive, right? So we can always take it down to the spiritual terms. So it's like, God, please forgive me for being hypersensitive and having idolatry, and please remove these defects of character. And then I talked to my daughter the next day, and I was able to calmly say, I know you're stressed, but it's not okay for you to hang up on me. Said, it's not very nice, and I don't like it. And she's like, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. And I'm like, it's forgiven and forgotten. And it is forgiven, forgotten. The only reason I remember is so that I can bring it up and hopefully it'll help someone. So again, I can't say my daughter triggered me. My daughter pushed my buttons. It's my job to figure out why I'm triggered and why I have those buttons and get rid of them. And they say, was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important? The solution is a relationship with God as we understand God. And then it continues and said, we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, another name of God. Isn't that beautiful? Spirit of the whole universe, right? And it says, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas didn't work, but the God idea did. And then the next paragraph I think is so cool. Bottom of page 52, they're talking about the Wright brothers who made the first airplane. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. Okay, if I were to give a test or if I were to answer a test and someone said, what was the mainspring, the most important thing about the Wright brothers that allowed them to build an airplane? I would have said they understood aerodynamics and physics and all that stuff, but they're saying no, it was their faith was the mainspring of their accomplishment. What? How could that be? And here's why. Because faith is the currency in the spiritual world. Faith actually does something. If here on earth, if I want something, if I go to the store and I want, a tank of gas, I hand the clerk, a $50 bill, well, now $100 bill, right? And I get my tank of gas, or I hand him my American Express card. But on the spiritual plane, I can't hand God my Amex card and say, restore me to sanity. Faith is the currency in the spiritual world, and it is a catalyst. It actually makes things happen. And we'll see when we talk about the fourth step that the opposite of faith is fear. And remember, when it talks in that paragraph about fear, it talks about fear setting negative things in motion. But faith, me believing that God could restore me to sanity, actually is an important piece of God restoring me to sanity. How exactly does it work? I don't know. But I picture it goes something like this. God sitting up there It's got a band of angels with their like hard hats and tool belts on, ready to do renovation jobs and transformation jobs in our hearts, right? And a prayer comes up. God, I'm not sure if you exist. And if you do exist, I'm not sure if you care about me. But if you do exist and you do care, I need some help. And meanwhile, I'll try to start treating people a little better. Well, I think God then calls, team one angels and say, you guys, our next search and rescue mission is for her, for him, and sends them down, right? That like faith actually does something in the spiritual world. That may not be exactly how it works, but that's how I picture it. And I think it's something along those lines. Faith, generally activated by prayer, does something. It's currency in the spiritual world. Okay, page 53, they say, we all like logic, but, hence we are at pains to tell why we think our faith is reasonable. They just say it's reasonable to have faith. Well, of course, if there's this power in the world that has all knowledge of everything, that has all love, that knows everything and has all power, of course I would want to be connected with this power, right? Of course. And they say, logically, it just makes sense to try to find God. They say, but we generally don't, right? We are stubborn people as a group. And it says, when we became alcoholics or compulsive eaters, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we couldn't postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition, either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? Okay, another weird sentence. Either God is everything or else he's nothing. I mean, does that mean like God is my pen and God is my cell phone? Well, no, that's just silly. I think what it means is that ultimately we have to give God everything, or it's as if I give God nothing. I can't say, God, take my food plan, be in charge of my food, remove my food obsession, but I'm going to do what I want when it comes to doing my income taxes. We have to give God everything. Um, but of course, why wouldn't we want to? He's infinite power and love and cares about us and like knows everything. So, but again, we are stubborn people. And it says, we're not sure what to do. But let's think about it. Bottom of page 53. We all have faith, top of 54. Don't we believe in our own reasoning, our own power to think? I mean, think about it. Every time when we all went to sit down on our chairs before this meeting, we all had faith that our chairs would not break. Maybe because we sat on that chair 50 times before, but maybe it's a brand new chair. We still had that faith because we've seen when people sit on chairs, the chairs don't break. But we've seen the same thing here. When people work the 12 steps, surrender their lives to God, clean up their past, their lives work and they stop binging. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like it's reasonable. And they say, okay, it's reasonable. And says, and we've also been worshipers too, right? It says, page 54, had we not variously worshiped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? Notice they don't say alcohol or food. Sometimes people say, oh, food is my idol. I worship food. That is not true. We worship ourselves, and then we have no defense against the food coming in. We don't worship the food. We're powerless over having to consume it. We worshiped other people, sentiment. I mean, that was like me in college. There's a boy I liked who didn't like me, and I would write this soppy poetry about how we're looking at the same moon. He didn't know I existed. I worshiped sentiment, things, right? Money, and ourselves. And sometimes we had a better motives. We worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower, and we've loved. And they say it's impossible to say we have no capacity for faith or love or worship. And by the way, it is important to worship, not just acknowledge God, but to worship. I always start my prayers with worship, just acknowledging him for who he is. And again, in any religion or even no religion at all, We can, if we don't know how, we can play a song, a worshipful song. We can Google, how to worship God if I don't have a religion. Worship, right? And then it says, imagine life without faith. It wouldn't be life. Um, that we need more. We need faith. And page 55, they say, what about the people who proved that man could never fly? That was logic, right? But then someone did. The Wright brothers came along, and then they transitioned so beautifully. We've seen another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their human problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Why would we do that? Because sometimes we would rather be right than be healed. We would rather be right than be healed. And, we can start looking and saying, if God did this for other people, he could do it for me. And sometimes, and if we have time, I'll get into it when people say, think why God won't do it for me. And then my favorite line in the book, page 55. Actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Then it says, it may be obscured by calamity, pomp, worship of other things, but hold on, someone's unmuted. But in some form or another, it is there. So look at that. Deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. So that means when God created us, he gave us like one heart, two lungs, two kidneys, one stomach, and somewhere in there, he planted the fundamental idea of himself. That God cares about us so much that he planted the idea of himself in us. But just like cataracts can obscure our view in the physical world, they're saying some things can obscure this vision of God, this fundamental idea of God. And what is it? Calamity, bad things that have happened to us or other people, pomp, worship of myself, and worship of other things. But here's the promise, in some form or other, it is there. So when I'm sponsoring someone and we get to step 2, I ask her to look at, is calamity, is worship of yourself, it's worship of other things like your idols. What are they? Because those things block our view of God and we have to get them out of the way. And then they tell us faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power are facts as old as man himself. So faith, belief in the power of God and miraculous demonstrations of that power. Because what good is faith without power? What good is it if I believe in God, but I can't access his power? It's like if I have a lamp in my room that's not plugged in, it does me no good, right? We have to access his power. And then they say, we finally saw faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. And they're telling us we can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, right? And we talked about the 5 or 6 or 7 prejudices last week that can block our view of God. Enables you to think honestly. So we have to be honest. So if we went to Catholic school and a nun with a ruler slapped our wrist, and we say, that proves that all religious people are evil, we have to think honestly about that. Like, come on, that just shows that one nun was out of line, nothing more. Encourages us to search diligently. Then it says, you can join us on the broad highway. And they promise the consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. And then they just close by telling a story that they think is like really important. Page 56, the minister's son. And his full story is in the chapter, Our Southern Friend, which is on page 200 and something. It starts on 208, and we'll go into it a little bit. So here's this minister's son. Let's set the scene. He's in an asylum. Why? Well, here was his past. He went to church school. He rebelled. He had pride. And then in his immediate family, Businesses failed. There was insanity. People died of illness. People committed suicide. That's calamity. He was embittered and depressed, disillusioned after the war, mental and physical collapse, the point of self-destruction, ready to, hurt himself, and he's in a hospital. And he meets another alcoholic that he has a conversation with. And I think this is just so beautiful. So in here in We Agnostics, he's like, if there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. But here's the whole conversation. He goes to see this man, another inmate in the asylum, and the man asks him if he believes in God. He says, do you believe in a power greater than yourself? And the man said, I believe in electricity and other forces of nature, but as for God, if there is one, he hasn't done anything for me. Then the man says to him, he doesn't argue with him and say, oh, you're not blind, you're not crippled. He doesn't argue. He says, are you willing to right all the wrongs you've ever done, no matter how wrong you think the others were? Are you willing to be honest with yourself and tell someone about yourself? And are you willing to think of other people, of their needs instead of your own, in order to get rid of the drink problem? I'll do anything, this alcoholic says. Willingness opens the door to grace. So here he is. He's willing to go to any lengths, but he has no step 2 yet, right? So I can say I'm powerless over, let's take pneumonia. If I, God forbid, had pneumonia again, I'm powerless over pneumonia and my life is unmanageable. Okay, well, until a doctor gives me penicillin and I trust that doctor enough to take the penicillin, I'm not going to get better. So here he is. He just has a first step and he says, I'll do anything. And then his friend says, all your troubles are over. So our friend, the minister's son, goes back into his room and a thought comes, can all the worthwhile people I've known be wrong against God? So a little humility, right? He starts thinking, maybe I'm wrong and other people are right. And then he's thinking about it and then he hears the voice. Who are you to say there is no God? And he prays. But first he goes back to his friend's room and he says, I have to ask you a question. How does prayer fit into this thing? And his friend says very wisely, well, you've probably tried praying like I have. When you've been in a jam, you said, God, please do this or that. And if it turned out your way, that was the last of it. And if it didn't, you said, there isn't any God, or he doesn't do anything for me. Is that right? Yes, says the minister's son. And boy, I could have said yes too to that one. This is what his friend said. That isn't the way. The thing I do is to say, God, here I am, and here are all my troubles. I've made a mess of things and can't do anything about it. You take me and all my troubles and do anything you want with me. Does that answer your question? Yes, it does, the minister's son said. He says, I return to bed. It doesn't make sense. Suddenly, I feel a wave of utter hopelessness sweep over me. I am in the bottom of hell, and there a tremendous hope is born. It might be true. See, he had a maybe. That's all we need. We can start with a maybe. He says, I tumble out of bed onto my knees. I know not what I say, but slowly a great peace comes to me. I feel lifted up. I believe in God. I crawl back into bed and sleep like a child. It's a beautiful story. Back on page 56, it says that when he prayed, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. He stood in the power, and this is how he described God, infinite power and love. See, just as a result of being willing to believe. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his creator. It says his cornerstone was in place. His alcoholic problem was taken away. And guys, that was my experience too. After, I've shared this, I shared it last week. I was binging right before a meeting, couldn't stop, behind a locked bathroom door. Went to a meeting took a sponsor who I knew was like really tough and would let me get away with nothing. And I said, I will do whatever you tell me. And I went to the parking lot and I basically said the same thing to God. I'm willing to admit everything I think about you is wrong. And my food problem was taken away that very, I could say these words myself, that very night years ago, it disappeared, save for a few brief moments of temptation. The thought of drink, the thought of food has never returned. God had restored his sanity, my sanity, the sanity of everyone who does this. And they say, what is, page 57, what is this but a miracle of healing, yet its elements are simple? I find that line so cool. They are saying the elements of a miracle are simple, like a recipe, right? You want a miracle? Here are the elements. Circumstances made him willing to believe, right? So he humbly offered himself to his maker. Step 3. Then he knew. And I'm sure he went ahead and he cleaned up the wreckage of his past and helped others. We can't just stop with, I believe in God. You know, we've got steps up. 3 through 12 we also have to do, but we're here at 2. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds, right? Page, I don't remember what page. It's in How It Works. Once the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. He, God, has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we draw near to him, he discloses himself to us. Like that's a promise. And I just want to talk briefly. Well, actually, I can go a little more than briefly because I have some time. About what blocks us, right? What are our big blocks? And they tell us before we go to step 3, this I'm on page 60. It says being convinced. We were at step 3. What do we have to be convinced of? We have to be convinced of the ABCs that are right there. A, that we were compulsive eaters and could not manage our own lives. Okay, that's easy, right? That's why we're all here. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our compulsive eating. Okay, so we have to get to the fact where it's like no human power, not the group. And I've heard, again, some people say, well, if you can't believe in God, start with group. No, that's like telling someone with pneumonia, the solution's penicillin, but if you don't like taking pills, chew gummy vitamins. No, the solution to penicillin is, the solution to pneumonia is penicillin. If it's bacterial pneumonia, the solution to compulsive eating is a relationship with God, a proper relationship with God. So we can get that, right? I'm a compulsive eater, can't manage my own life, that no human power could relieve my compulsive eating. And then C, here's the hard one, that God could and would if he were sought. So let's break it down. This is what I always ask people. Do you believe that God exists? And usually by the time they're here, they've been around at least a couple weeks. They're not eating compulsively anymore. They have a new group of friends. The obsession with food's getting less. They see other people believe in God and the difference it makes. Like, okay, yeah, I believe in God. Do you believe that God has removed the food obsession from other people? Yes, you know, there's 134 people here. A lot of them have had the food obsession removed. Yes, I believe that God has removed the food obsession from other people. Okay, now let's get personal. Do you believe God could remove your food obsession if he wanted to? He may not want to, right? But could he if he wanted to? And if we have any, you know, personal honesty, we have to say, well, yes, he's God. He could if he wanted to. Then here's the part where we get stuck. Do you believe he will if you seek him? And that's where we often say, no. I believe God exists. I believe he's removed the obsession from other people. I believe he could remove it from me if he wanted to, but I don't think he will. I don't think he wants to. And so I was thinking about that, and I thought that there's 5 reasons why a person would say, God could do it. He's done it for other people, but he won't do it for me. And I think these are the 5 reasons. One is I've done some really bad things. 2, I'm not worthy of it. Like we've got this shame, different from guilt. Guilt is from something I've done wrong, like I've robbed a bank. Shame is just feeling I'm just a bad person. 3, I've tried this so many times before and it hasn't worked. 4, it's my fault that I have this illness, so I'm not going to bother God with it. It's not like I have cancer or something, it's like my fault. And number 5, I'm not willing to do the work to seek him. Okay, to the person who says number 5 is the reason, I would say you're right. No guarantee God's going to restore you to sanity because we have to seek him. And by the way, that's why I tell my sponsees from day 1, they need to start spending time with God. Even if they're not sure God doesn't exist, they can start by saying, "Dear God, I don't even know if you exist." But this is about getting a relationship with God. And to get a relationship with anyone, we have to spend time with them. Okay, but if a person isn't willing to seek God, I say, for you, I got nothing. I got nothing for that person. But let's talk about the other 4 people. The person who says, I've done some really bad stuff. Well, to that person, I would say, you are in great company because so did the founders of AA. And that's why there's an 8th and a 9th step. We get to make good on the stuff we've done wrong. And yes, there's sometimes where we can't because it would cause more harm, but we're willing to. So you're fine. Number 2 is, I think, the reason most people have. I just don't deserve it. I'm not worthy. And I think there's 2 alternatives here. We could go to a therapist and spend I don't know, $20,000 to try and get good self-esteem. It won't work. Or the other thing is to realize worthiness is never a requirement. In this big book, you will not find the word worthy in the text section. Maybe it's in a story somewhere. It is not a requirement. Only willingness is. None of us are worthy. I am not worthy of what God has done for me. I am someone who, if used to be that if my boyfriend wasn't paying attention to me, I'd take a razor and slash myself up and say I'd been raped and go to the hospital for a fake rape exam. Not someone you'd put on, God's top 10 people he'd say are worthy of help. It doesn't matter. I was willing. And something strange happens as we go through this process and surrender our lives to God and clean up the past. We stop thinking about, am I worthy? What's my self-esteem like? Because we stop thinking about ourselves. We're just thinking about others and how we can be useful. And it's just ironic when we stop searching for that self-esteem and feeling of worthiness. We kind of feel it. I mean, I don't sit and think, do I have good self-esteem or worthiness? But I know I'm happy. So I don't have to ponder the state of my psyche. I'm happy. I have a clear conscience. That makes for good self-esteem. The third reason, I've tried it so many times before and it hadn't worked. Listen, you're in my company. I spent my first 7 years in OA not getting better, had about 50 different sponsors, did what I was told. But unfortunately, I wasn't told the right thing. So it's like I always say, if I'm walking with my cell phone, I'm trying to take a picture, but I'm pushing the on-off button. It doesn't matter if I've been doing it for 1 day, 7 years, 50 years. If my son walks up to me and says, Mom, you're pushing the wrong button here, suddenly I can take pictures if I'm willing to follow instructions. Doesn't matter. If you are here and you have not been recovered, maybe it's because you haven't had the right information. And in that case, I would tell you, get a sponsor who has worked these steps and has a relationship with God and is willing to help you get a relationship with God, and then just do what she tells you to do. Because when we get right information coupled with our willingness, recovery is inevitable. Sometimes we think, well, it's my fault. I caused this. And, the big book never says, did we inherit this? Did we cause it? What brings it on? It talks about selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of this illness. So I personally think that my selfishness and self-centeredness brought this on. But I also remember obsessing about food when I was in like pre-K. So had I done anything really selfish and self-centered to that point? No. I don't know. But let's say, for argument's sake, it's our fault. Either we caused this illness or we haven't worked it in the past and it's our fault we're in the mess we're in. So imagine I'm on my same cell phone that I can now take pictures on, and I'm crossing the street and I'm looking at my beautiful pictures. This one is of my daughter and her friend sticking their tongues out. But nevertheless, I'm looking at my pictures and I get hit by a truck and both my legs are broken. Am I ever going to tell the ambulance driver, it's my fault, my legs are broken. Don't take me to the hospital. I'll set my broken legs myself. Now, we would never do that, right? But when it comes to God, we kind of get all noble, like, don't worry, I'll do it myself. I'll get myself all cleaned up. Then I'll go back to the meetings. Then I'll go to God. Then I'll get a sponsor once I like get my life together. Imagine if I did that with my two broken legs. I'll go to the hospital once I set my broken legs. No. So again, when we realize that God can and will restore us to sanity, remember, faith is currency in the spiritual world. And then we can move on to step 3, which Melissa will talk about next week, about how to actually surrender our will and our lives to this God who we now believe is all loving and all powerful. It is not really possible to surrender our lives to a God who we think is out to get us. So hopefully, between last week and this week, I've convinced you all that God is worth knowing and loving and surrendering to. And that is all I have.